Evil rarely knocks. It usually smiles, brings you soup, and asks how your day was. It's not the people who scream at you that are the problem. It's the ones who offer to water your plants when you're away, and then steal your house while you're out of town. Let's get this straight. The most dangerous people don't hide in shadows. They sit beside you in community meetings, send cheerful emojis, and ask if you need help with your Netflix login. I'm not saying everyone who helps you with your Wi-Fi is a sociopath, but if they start calling you family before you've even shared a meal, maybe don't give them your PIN just yet. Welcome to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, where we gently point out that the evil doesn't just wear horns. He wears orthopedic sneakers, remembers your birthday, and offers to set up your Wi-Fi. In today's video, we're uncovering 8 red flags you've likely encountered in everyday life, but never named out loud. From false kindness to forgiveness as manipulation, we'll show you how to spot the signs, and better yet, how to respond with grace and clarity. And don't miss red flag 4. They collect your secrets, but never share theirs. That one? It could save you from handing your deepest truth to someone who's only here for the drama. Like, subscribe, and help us reach 1,000 kind souls so we can keep making truth-telling videos for wise, watchful elders like you. Let's begin. Red flag 1. Kindness that feels like currency. Let me ask you something. Have you ever received a gift that felt more like a transaction? You didn't ask for it. You didn't want it. But there it was, wrapped in shiny paper, topped with a smile that said, "Now you owe me forever." This, my friend, is not kindness. It is emotional credit card debt, and the interest rate is guilt. They're just so nice. That's what people say. He helped me move. She brings me lunch every Tuesday. He even changed my light bulbs. And yes, it might be genuine. But here's your Buddhist bell ringer of a question. Do you feel free after their kindness, or do you feel owned? Because real kindness doesn't keep score. It doesn't sigh when it helps you. It doesn't say, "Remember when I drove you to the doctor?" right before asking to borrow your car. That's not kindness. That's emotional blackmail, dressed in khaki pants. Let me tell you about Arnold. Retired firefighter, big heart. Lived down the hall from a woman named Beth. Beth was always there with a casserole. She helped him sort mail, reminded him to take his meds, and even picked up his prescriptions without being asked. Arnold thought he'd hit the neighbor jackpot, until one day, she asked him to co-sign a loan. When he hesitated, she said, "After everything I've done for you." That's when he realized she wasn't doing these things for him. She was doing them for leverage. Beth wasn't helping out of compassion, she was investing. And Arnold, he was the stock. Here's the thing, as we age, we become hungrier for connection and more grateful for help. It's beautiful, but it also makes us vulnerable to manipulators in polite packaging. Psychologists call it reciprocity pressure. We're wired to want to give back when someone gives to us. But Buddhism teaches us this. True generosity comes from emptiness, not expectation. When you give and expect a return, it's not a gift, it's a deal. So if someone helps you, then expects loyalty, silence, money, or guilt in return, that's not love. That's a hostage negotiation with a smile. In Buddhist practice, we call pure giving dana. It's one of the 10 paramis, or perfections of character. Dana doesn't come with receipts. It doesn't whisper in your ear 6 months later and say, "I did that favor, remember?" It disappears the moment it's given. Manipulative kindness, that's the opposite. It lingers. It reminds you. It taps you on the shoulder and says, "You owe me. Be nice." And if you're not careful, you'll start rearranging your life, just to repay a debt you never agreed to. The subtle signs of weaponized kindness. Here's how you can spot it. They're only kind when you're useful. They bring up past favors strategically, especially during arguments. Their generosity always has an audience. If they volunteer and no one's watching, do they still do it? You start feeling guilty when you say no, even to simple requests. If someone's generosity feels like it comes with a silent contract attached, trust that feeling. You're not ungrateful. You're just catching the scent of a kindness that's been sitting out too long. And honey, it's starting to rot. The Buddha once said, "It is intention that I call karma." So if someone's kindness comes with an agenda, conscious or not, it's not wholesome karma. It's manipulation masquerading as virtue. Sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. They grew up learning that love is a trade, that connection means debt. But that doesn't mean you need to play along. Here's your little monk-approved survival kit. 1. Gratitude is not obligation. You can be thankful for the soup without offering your entire kitchen. 2. Say thank you, and stop there. You don't need to pay back someone who gave with strings. Just acknowledge and release. 3. Watch reactions to your no. If a person gets offended by your boundaries, their kindness was always conditional. 4. Keep practicing dana, but make sure yours flows from a full cup, not an empty guilt. Because at the end of the day, love doesn't need receipts. Kindness doesn't keep score. And if someone's doing good things just to cash in later, they're not a friend. They're just a very polite scam artist with excellent baking skills. Red flag 2. They rewrite your past to control your present. That never happened, they say. You must be remembering it wrong. Why are you always so dramatic? You pause, tilt your head. You swear you remember it clearly. But now you're wondering, do I? Welcome to the gas station of the soul. Pull up, pump in a little self-doubt, and drive off into total confusion. This, my friend, is memory manipulation. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it doesn't need to be. You say something like, "Hey, I didn't appreciate it when you made that comment in front of my friends." And they say, "What? I never said that." You're too sensitive. Wow. You really don't let things go, do you? And suddenly you're not even upset anymore. You're apologizing for having a memory, for being alive during the event. That's the magic trick. Now, in Buddhism, we're taught that the past is impermanent. But that doesn't mean it's up for auction. There's a big difference between realizing the past is a river that flows and being shoved off a bridge by someone who insists the river never existed. What we're talking about here isn't the peaceful letting go of memory, it's the intentional erosion of your reality. And the worst part? They don't need to change history. They just need you to question it. Harold is 81, loves fishing, hates kale, and remembers everything, except where he put his reading glasses. One day, his daughter promised to visit on his birthday. She didn't come. No call, no message. A week later, she shows up with a smile and a plant and says, "Dad, we never said I'd come on your birthday. You must have misunderstood." Now, Harold was sure they talked about it. He remembered the time, the date, even that she said she was bringing lemon cake. But she denied it, said he was getting confused again. So Harold started to wonder, maybe I did forget, maybe I made it up. No, Harold, you didn't make it up, you just got edited. As we age, our confidence in our memory can wobble. A few lost keys, a forgotten name, and suddenly everyone thinks we're ready to hand over power of attorney. Manipulators know this. They slide into the cracks of self-doubt and start hanging wallpaper. And before you know it, your certainty is under new management. That's not support. That's sabotage in comfortable shoes. The cycle of control. Here's how it usually goes. 1. They deny what happened, just enough to make you doubt. 2. They question your stability. You're tired. You've been so emotional lately. 3. They offer themselves as the reliable one. Don't worry, I'll handle it. You don't need to stress your mind. 4. You start trusting them more than yourself, which is exactly what they want. They don't want your respect, they want your confusion. Because when you don't trust your own eyes, you'll start asking theirs for permission to see. In the Noble Eightfold Path, there's a teaching called right view, seeing things clearly as they are. But people who manipulate your memory, they don't want clarity. They want fog, because fog is where they operate best. They'll convince you the sun isn't shining while you're sweating in its light, and they'll say it with such calm conviction, you'll start reaching for a sweater. Confusion, a Zen monk once said, is the first tool of control. How do you know if someone's memory is too flexible? They insist you're wrong, even when others agree with you. They rewrite conversations to favor themselves, always. They deny saying things you clearly remember. They accuse you of being sensitive anytime you bring up a concern. You feel more confused after talking to them than before. If talking to someone feels like going through TSA security with gaslighting instead of pat-downs, you're not paranoid. You're just being emotionally searched. What to do when it happens? 1. Write things down, especially conversations that feel off. A journal isn't just for healing, it's a memory anchor. 2. Trust your inner witness. If you felt it in your body, it happened. You don't need external validation. 3. Push back gently but firmly. That's not how I remember it, and that memory matters to me. 4. Don't debate your reality. You don't need to convince them. Just don't let them move the furniture in your mind. 5. Ask this Buddhist question: does this person bring me clarity or confusion? If it's always the latter, stop asking them to read your map. They're not lost, they're steering. Red flag 3. Their calmness feels like pressure, not peace. Let me paint a picture for you. You're talking to someone. They're calm, very calm, too calm. You've just shared something that made you vulnerable, a fear, a mistake, a hope. They nod, smile slightly, say something like, "You're overreacting, but I get it." There's no yelling, no accusations. Just an eerie, tranquil judgment that seeps into your bones. You walk away wondering why you feel smaller. You know the type. They speak in a soothing voice. They never interrupt. They seem above it all. And you're supposed to be grateful they're willing to talk to you at all. And yet, every time you open up, you leave the conversation with a strange mix of guilt and confusion, like you just confessed your sins to a therapist who charges by the ounce of shame. Here's the thing. Calm is not the same as peace. A predator doesn't need to roar. Sometimes it just blinks slowly and waits. Some of the most manipulative people I've ever met didn't raise their voice once. They didn't need to. They'd already trained the people around them to whisper. Let's talk about Linda. Linda led a meditation group for seniors in her community center. She wore white linen, spoke softly, and smelled like a lavender diffuser. Everyone admired her composure. But if you brought up a boundary, say, "Linda, please don't comment on my weight during circle time," she'd blink, smile, and say, "It's your ego that's reacting. I'm just observing." See what she did there? She didn't respond to the criticism. She transcended it. And in doing so, she made the other person feel like the problem wasn't what she said. It was that you weren't enlightened enough to receive it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Weaponized Calmness. Seniors, in particular, are often conditioned to respect calmness. We grew up with phrases like, "Don't cause a scene, be the bigger person, keep the peace." But sometimes keeping the peace just means letting someone walk all over you quietly. And manipulators know this. They adopt that Zen demeanor, not because they've attained inner peace, but because it's a power move. Let's be clear. In Buddhism, yes, we value calm. We cultivate mindfulness, equanimity, non-reactivity, but we also practice wise speech, right action, and compassionate truth. Being silent while someone else suffers, that's not enlightenment. That's emotional detachment disguised as spiritual depth. There's a Buddhist saying, silence is not always wisdom. Sometimes it's just fear with its mouth closed. And sometimes it's manipulation wearing a mala necklace. How do you know when someone's calm is a red flag? They never express emotion, but you always feel guilty. You walk on eggshells around them, even though they never do anything wrong. They understand everything, but rarely apologize. They frame all your concerns as your inner work. They never react, but you always feel like you overreacted. If someone's stillness feels more like a pressure cooker than a hug, that's not your spiritual immaturity. That's them using stoic silence as a chokehold. George, 75, joined a men's mindfulness group after his wife passed. He was grieving, raw, honest. One day he shared how lonely he felt. The group leader said, "Maybe the loneliness is just your attachment to ego." George nodded, said nothing, but afterward he stopped sharing, not because he healed, because he felt shamed for having emotions. That's not support. That's spiritual gaslighting in a bamboo robe. Here's how you can tell when calmness is real. You feel more yourself around them, not less. Their silence creates space, not tension. You feel seen, not managed. You can disagree without feeling like a child scolded with a smile. Buddhist calm doesn't dominate, it invites. It's the kind of presence that says, you can unravel here and I won't punish you for it. How to respond to false calm. Name what you feel. I notice I feel dismissed when that happens, even if it's not loud. 2. Stay grounded in your truth. Just because they're quiet doesn't mean they're right. 3. Refuse the spiritual shame card. You can be enlightened and annoyed. You can meditate and set boundaries. 4. Ask the Buddha question, is their peace real or is it just a cage I can't see? Red flag 4. They collect your secrets but never share theirs. You can tell me anything, they say. And you do, and you feel lighter for a while, until one day you realize you don't know a single damn thing about them. You've spilled your heart, your childhood, your family traumas, your weird dreams about your dentist, and all you've gotten back is, I'm just a really private person. Ah yes, the emotionally encrypted. They know everything about you, your history, your triggers, your fears, but when you ask where they're from, they say, oh, it's complicated. Is it? Or are they building an arsenal, one secret at a time? Here's the trick. These people don't ask for your trust, they earn it strategically. They nod when you talk. They offer just enough reaction to make you feel safe. Maybe even share a vague story about their rough childhood, but with zero specifics. You think you're bonding. You think you found a kindred spirit. But what you've really found is a therapist with no license and too much free time. Agnes is 82. Sweet, kind, big fan of jigsaw puzzles and conspiracy documentaries. She met Denise through a widow support group. Denise was wonderful, always listening, always supportive, always there for her. Agnes told her everything. How she missed her husband, how her son had a gambling problem, how she once shoplifted a bottle of nail polish in 1963 and still felt guilty. And Denise didn't share much. Just little affirmations. Wow, you're so strong. Thank you for telling me that. Then one day, Agnes got into a disagreement with another woman in the group. Guess who suddenly knew all of Agnes's secrets? And guess who was mysteriously silent? This kind of person doesn't crave closeness. They crave control through information, and secrets, especially the vulnerable, honest kind, are currency. They're not listening to connect, they're listening to store data. Because when the moment comes, when you say no, when you set a boundary, when you disappoint them, they don't get mad, they get historical. It's funny you say that, especially after what you told me about your sister. You of all people shouldn't judge. Remember that thing you told me? And there it is, the emotional blackmail slip, folded neatly in a velvet glove. Buddhism teaches that true intimacy comes from shared vulnerability. It's not about spilling your guts. It's about mutual openness, where both hearts are on the table. That doesn't mean we force people to share, but it does mean we notice when we're the only one walking around emotionally naked, while they're wrapped in 7 spiritual shawls of secrecy. When one hand gives and the other stays closed, there is no circle, only leverage. Here's the truth many don't like to say out loud. Aging can be lonely, and loneliness makes us crave connection, even if it's one-sided. We share because we want to feel close, because it feels so good to finally be heard. But manipulative people know this. They'll sit there nodding, asking gentle questions like, "Tell me more about that. How did that make you feel?" And we think, finally, someone who listens. But really, we're just building them a very detailed emotional instruction manual for us. Here's how you know when someone is collecting, not connecting. They ask a lot about your life, but dodge questions about theirs. They remember everything you tell them, but rarely reveal anything specific about themselves. They praise your openness in a way that feels performative. You feel exposed, but know nothing about them in return. When conflict arises, they suddenly know exactly where to poke. If you feel like you've handed someone the nuclear launch codes to your emotional life, and they're holding the button with a half smile, you're not in a friendship. You're in a quiet hostage situation. What you can do. 1. Slow down the sharing. Just because someone listens well doesn't mean they deserve your story. 2. Ask questions back. "I've shared a lot. Can I ask, what's your take on that kind of thing?" 3. Notice deflection. If they always pivot or offer vague non-answers, take note. 4. Set emotional boundaries. You can be kind without being transparent. Oversharing isn't love, it's vulnerability on discount. 5. Buddhist reflection. Does this exchange create balance or does it build a tab? Red flag 5. Their apologies always have a shadow. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry if you misunderstood me. I'm sorry, but let's not make this a big deal." Ah yes, the apology-shaped object. Looks like an apology. Sounds like one. But when you bite into it, it tastes like gasoline and guilt crumbs. Some people don't say sorry to make peace. They say sorry to reset your anger, shut down the conversation, and protect their reputation from your inconvenient emotions. Here's how it works. 1. They hurt you, gently, elegantly, with taste. 2. You bring it up, probably after days of meditation and drafting a script. 3. They apologize, kind of, not really. 4. You feel guilty for not accepting it fast enough. And voila, you're back to square one, with your pain now classified as a drama. They walk away looking humble and composed. You walk away wondering if you're just emotionally high maintenance. Ron, 76, has been married for over 40 years. He once kept a list, yes, a literal list of his wife's apologies. Not because he was spiteful, but because he noticed a pattern. Every time she said, "I'm sorry," it was followed by, "But you're too sensitive. But you shouldn't have taken it that way. But that's just how I am." After 25 years of, "I'm sorry, but," Ron started realizing that what he'd been collecting all along wasn't apologies. It was proof that his feelings were negotiable. Let's break down the parts of this dark little creature. The deflection. "I'm sorry you misunderstood me." Translation: the problem is your brain. The guilt flip. "I'm sorry this upset you. I was just trying to help." Translation: I caused pain, but I did it with pure motives, so I'm absolved. The opt-out clause: let's just move on. Translation: I don't want to sit in the discomfort of your truth. Some even go spiritual with it. Let's not hold on to negative energy. Forgiveness is about moving forward, not blaming. And just like that, your pain becomes the problem, not the thing that caused it. The Buddha taught that intention, satana, is the seed of karma. So when someone says sorry, the question isn't whether they said it, it's why they said it. Did it come from remorse or from fear of consequences? Real apology is an act of vulnerability, a bowing of the ego, a willingness to say, "You were hurt by me, and I will sit with that," not rush past it. False apology is just ego on mute, until the next time they're called out. Let's be honest. Sometimes when you're older and tired and just want peace, you'll take whatever apology you can get. You tell yourself, "They tried. Maybe I am being too sensitive. I don't want to start a fight." But every time you accept a shadow apology, you teach someone that your pain is negotiable, that your peace has a price tag, that as long as they say the magic words, even with a side of sarcasm or condescension, they're off the hook. You become a character in their emotional sitcom, and they're always the star. If someone's apology makes you feel more confused than comforted, more guilty than healed, more silenced than heard, it wasn't an apology. It was a public relations strategy. What you can do instead. 1. Pause before accepting. You don't owe anyone immediate forgiveness, especially if it's performative. 2. Ask for clarity. What are you apologizing for? If they can't answer directly, they're not apologizing. They're just escaping. 3. Acknowledge how it lands. I hear your words, but I still feel dismissed. Can we stay with this? 4. Set your own closure. You can forgive someone without welcoming them back into your life or your emotional space. 5. Buddhist wisdom. Compassion is not appeasement, and forgiveness is not forgetting. Red flag 6. They smile during your pain. There's a certain kind of smile that doesn't comfort you. It unsettles you. You're crying, they're calm, you're unraveling, they're curious. And somewhere in their still, steady expression, you notice it. The faintest upward twitch of the lip, just enough to say, "Oh, you're in pain? Fascinating. Do go on." We often mistake non-reactivity for emotional strength. But what if I told you that some people stay calm while others suffer, not because they're wise, but because they're feeding off it? It's not always with words. It's not always with action. Sometimes it's just in the eyes. That eerie little sparkle when your world falls apart and they just sit there watching, like a therapist who forgot how to blink. Eleanor was 79, recovering from a bad fall. She stayed at a rehab center where one of the volunteers, a cheerful woman named Claire, was known for being so sweet. Claire always had a smile, a gentle voice, and a tray of tea. But Eleanor noticed something odd. When residents got bad news about their health, about their families, Claire was always there, not to comfort, but to listen. And while others cried, Claire stayed oddly delighted, nodding, watching, sometimes even humming. One day, Eleanor saw her smile, wide and soft, right after someone broke down over losing their home. That's when she knew. Claire wasn't compassionate. Claire was a grief tourist. And Eleanor? She stopped drinking the tea. There's a term in psychology, schadenfreude, the strange pleasure we sometimes feel at others' misfortune. Most of us feel it in fleeting, guilty ways, like when the arrogant neighbor finally gets fined for illegal parking. But there are those who live for it. Not just a moment of glee, but an ongoing appetite for witnessing suffering, not to comfort, but to study, to compare, to feel powerful. In Buddhism, we speak often of karuna, compassion. True karuna arises when we witness suffering and feel moved to alleviate it. But there's an absence that's even more dangerous than hatred, and that's indifference. Because hatred at least acknowledges your humanity. Indifference? That's someone looking through you, seeing your tears as background noise. Or worse, entertainment. You might be dealing with one if they're always there when something goes wrong, but never when things go well. They never reach out unless you're struggling. They smile softly while you're falling apart. Never a hug, never a tear. They say things like, "Wow, that's heavy. How are you even surviving?" Translation, "Keep going. The show's just getting good." These folks are emotional storm chasers, drawn to chaos, not to help, but to watch the lightning hit. Why we miss this red flag? Because we've been taught that a calm person is a safe person, that someone who doesn't get rattled must be grounded, wise, evolved. But here's a Buddhist truth bomb for you. Stillness without empathy is not wisdom. It's just silence with better posture. And in elder psychology, we see a pattern too. Older adults often tolerate helpers who linger during pain because we mistake their presence for support. But if someone never brings comfort, only observations, you might be in the company of someone who doesn't want your healing. They want your breakdown. Ask this: when I cry, do they move closer or just lean back and watch? When I break, do they offer presence or posture? After I open up, do I feel held or studied? If you feel more like a case study than a human being, you're not imagining things. You're just finally seeing clearly. What you can do. 1. Limit your vulnerability. You don't have to perform your pain for someone just because they seem interested. 2. Notice patterns. Are they only available during your worst moments? 3. Ask for what you need. I don't need commentary. I need presence. 4. Trust your unease. If their smile feels cold, their kindness feels distant, and your pain becomes their comfort zone, leave the conversation. Leave the room. Leave the tea. 5. Buddhist reminder, not all who listen are safe. Not all who are quiet are kind. Red flag 7. They make you feel wise just to keep you blind. You're so insightful. You've lived such a full life. I admire your wisdom so much. I always learn something from you. Sounds lovely, right? It's flattery, sure. But it also feels a little sticky. Like they're buttering you up before something slides under your emotional radar. That's because this kind of flattery isn't admiration. It's camouflage. They're not praising you to empower you. They're praising you to distract you. You see, most manipulators aren't cartoon villains. They don't tie you to train tracks and laugh maniacally. No. They compliment your strength so you don't notice they're draining it. They admire your wisdom so you won't dare question your own confusion. It's the emotional version of, you're too smart to fall for something like this. And you think, yeah, I guess I am. Meanwhile, they're already inside your psychological pantry, rearranging the jars. Henry, 84, was a retired professor. Brilliant, precise, polite. One day at a community lecture, he met a woman named Sheila. Sheila was charming, wide-eyed, warm, always fascinated by everything he said. "You're such a treasure," she'd say. "The things you've seen, there's so much to learn from you." Henry was flattered. Of course he was. Who wouldn't be? Within a few months, Sheila was asking him to review her business proposal. She wanted his wise eyes on it. She also wanted $30,000. Henry didn't see it coming, because he'd been lulled into believing he was in control. But here's the truth. You're easiest to fool when you think you're too wise to be fooled. Older adults, especially those who've lived lives of leadership, care, or responsibility, are often hungry for continued relevance. We want to feel seen, valued, useful. And when someone finally treats us like a sage, a source of truth, a pillar of strength, it feels like home. But not all admiration is wholesome. Some is strategic. It disarms you. It slows your inner alarm bells. It says, "Don't worry, you're the one with the upper hand," until you realize you're not even holding the cards anymore. In Buddhism, we study the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. But here's a fun secret poison: flattery. Not when given honestly, but when used to inflate the ego just enough to block your inner seeing. The Buddha warned us, praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, all are worldly winds. And the moment we start steering our boat by the direction of praise, we're already off course. How to spot praise with a purpose. Real admiration is steady, calm, and specific. It lifts without inflating. Tactical flattery, though? It has a scent. Here are some signs. It's too fast and too frequent. It shows up right before a request. It praises your intuition while subtly clouding it. It makes you feel powerful but leaves you passive. You've got such good judgment. You've probably already sensed what I need. And suddenly you're doing favors you didn't agree to. Because how could someone as wise as you say no? Let's say someone says, "You're such a good judge of character." But then they bring around someone who makes your skin crawl. You say, "Something about this feels off." They say, "Really? I thought you'd love him." Now you're trapped. Do you trust your gut, or do you protect the image they've been feeding you? Because no one wants to disappoint a compliment. That's the trap. The praise wasn't for your benefit. It was to lock you into a role, the wise one who never says no. What you can do: 1. Appreciate praise, but hold it lightly. Don't let compliments rewrite your instincts. 2. Watch the timing. If praise shows up right before they want something, it's not praise, it's prepayment. 3. Stay humble. Stay alert. True wisdom doesn't need to prove itself or protect its image. 4. Buddhist filter. Does this compliment anchor me or distract me? 5. Say this to yourself: I can be wise and still be deceived. That's what makes me wiser. Red flag 8. They preach forgiveness to avoid accountability. Let it go. Forgiveness is for you, not them. You're still holding on to that? Ah, yes, the weaponized wisdom quote, delivered calmly, served with a gentle tone, and used exclusively when you are upset about something they did. This is not spiritual maturity. It's a get-out-of-consequences-free card, written in cursive on recycled paper. Some people don't actually want your forgiveness. They want your silence, your emotional amnesia, your agreement to not make things uncomfortable. So they reach for the big guns. What would Buddha do? Don't lower your vibration. You're clinging to the past. Aren't you supposed to be evolving? They don't want peace. They want permission to keep doing what they've always done, but this time with less guilt and fewer interruptions. Ruth, 81, had a son named Joel. Joel was into crystals, retreats, and saying namaste in emails. Ruth loved that he'd found spirituality until he started using it like a spiritual taser. When she brought up how he'd never paid her back for borrowing money to find himself in Costa Rica, he said, "Mom, you're stuck in lack consciousness." When she asked why he forgot her birthday again, he replied, "You're too attached to outcomes. Can't you just practice presence?" And when she finally snapped and said she was hurt, he said, "Forgiveness is divine. You're poisoning yourself by holding on to this." Ruth didn't feel enlightened. She felt emotionally mugged with a yoga mat. Here's the mind trick. 1. You feel hurt. 2. They avoid the discomfort of your hurt by spiritualizing it. 3. You begin questioning your right to be upset. 4. They walk away centered, and you feel like a petty little goblin who failed a spiritual quiz. This isn't forgiveness. This is emotional guilt judo. They flip your righteous pain into a shameful lesson about your supposed immaturity. Let's clear this up once and for all. Buddha never said, "Let it go so they can keep doing it." Forgiveness in Buddhism is an internal release. It is the decision to no longer carry poison in your heart. It has nothing to do with letting the other person off the hook. The Buddha didn't teach forgiveness as a way to excuse karma. He taught it as a way to avoid adding more. So when someone says, "Forgive me," but never says, "I'm sorry," never asks, "How did I hurt you?" never says, "I want to make this right," that's not growth. That's emotional disappearing ink. Real forgiveness includes acknowledgement of harm, genuine remorse, a willingness to change, space for healing, not pressure to forget. Anything less is just public relations in a saffron robe. When you're told to be the bigger person, especially as we age, this line gets used a lot. You've lived long enough to know better. Don't waste energy on this. You're the wise one. Just let it go. No, being older doesn't mean you have to be a doormat in robes. It doesn't mean you owe people your peace just because they found a way to sound spiritually clever while being emotionally lazy. You don't have to turn the other cheek if they're just going to slap that one too. Watch out if they use forgiveness as a way to change the subject. They quote spiritual teachers in arguments, but never look at their own behavior. They tell you to let it go, but never offer you healing, validation, or responsibility. You feel more silenced than soothed after they preach forgiveness. If someone uses peace talk like a fog machine, it's not about love, it's about smoke cover. What you can do. 1. Reclaim forgiveness as your tool, not their escape hatch. I'm working toward forgiveness, but I still need this pain acknowledged. 2. Reject spiritual bypassing. Quoting the Buddha doesn't cancel out what you did. Let's stay human here. 3. Set terms for your healing. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It can mean, I bless you from afar, with zero further access to my life. 4. Buddhist reminder. Compassion without boundaries is just enabling in robes. The Buddhist view, why evil exists, and what to do about it. You've made it through the forest of red flags. You've seen the smiling liars, the silent manipulators, the Zen-sounding gaslighters. You've probably thought of at least 3 people you now suspect might be building an altar to Mara in their basement. So now comes the big question. Why? Why do people act this way? Why do some folks collect secrets like trading cards? Why do they twist your reality, flip your forgiveness, and smile when you cry? Is it evil? Is it trauma? Is it a bad childhood and too many self-help books? Buckle up, let's get spiritual. What is evil, really? In Buddhism, there's no devil with horns. No fire pits, no eternal damnation, no guy named Stan trying to steal your soul. Instead, we talk about kleshas, the mental poisons. These are the inner forces that distort reality and drive suffering. Greed, lobha, hatred, delusion. Together, they form what I like to call the unholy trifecta of terrible dinner guests. They make people hungry for control, allergic to compassion, and blind to the wake of harm they leave behind. So, are they evil or just deeply unwell? Here's where it gets tricky. A lot of people who behave in toxic, manipulative ways don't see themselves as evil. They see themselves as clever, wounded, or just realistic. They lie to protect their pride. They gaslight to avoid shame. They exploit others because deep down, they don't believe in mutual love, only survival. In psychology, we call this emotional defense mechanisms gone rogue. In Buddhism, we call it ignorance-born karma. Either way, they don't know what they're doing. Or worse, they know exactly what they're doing and still think it's justified. Here's something no one tells you when you turn 70. People don't usually change. They just get better at being who they already are. The generous become more generous. The selfish become more strategic. The kind become gentler. The cruel become quieter. So if someone's been subtly harmful for 30 years, they're not going to wake up next Tuesday and become Mr. Rogers, especially if they've never been held accountable. So what do? Do we forgive them, confront them, put crystals on our foreheads and hope for the best? Let's talk strategy. The Buddhist kind. Step 1. Understand karma without guilt-tripping yourself. Karma isn't cosmic punishment. It's cause and effect. When someone lives from delusion and fear, they plant seeds, and those seeds grow into suffering for them and for those around them. Your job isn't to fix their garden. It's to stop letting them plant weeds in yours. And if you've let a few in before, guess what? That's not weakness. That's humanity. You trusted, you loved, you gave the benefit of the doubt. And now, you've learned. That's the real karma, not retribution, not revenge. Just awareness and a new choice. Step 2. Don't try to convert the unconvertible full. There's an old Zen saying, trying to wake someone pretending to sleep is a waste of your breath. You can send articles, you can write long letters, you can even host a PowerPoint night called "This is How You Hurt Me," a retrospective. But if someone is committed to misunderstanding you, you'll only exhaust yourself. Save your energy for those who say, "I didn't realize I hurt you. Tell me more." That's where healing lives, not in trying to get a narcissist to say you were right. Step 3. Practice compassion with boundaries. Buddhism doesn't teach us to hate, but it also doesn't tell us to tolerate poison. You can say, "I wish you well. I forgive you for being asleep, but I no longer hand you the keys to my heart, mind, or Tupperware drawer." Compassion doesn't mean contact. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them harm you again. As Ram Dass put it, you can still love them from a very safe distance, like across the street, through binoculars, wearing Kevlar. Step 4. Reclaim your power through clarity. You want real peace? Don't wait for them to change. Just see clearly. See what they are, see what they're not, and stop arguing with either. When you stop needing someone to be different, you stop leaking your joy into their dysfunction. That's when you begin to rise. So here we are, dear one. 8 red flags and not a single exorcism required. You've seen the smiles that sting, the apologies that gaslight, the silence that suffocates. We've walked through tea-sipping manipulators, flattery traps, and forgiveness bombs dressed as spiritual growth. But remember this, you are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are just finally noticing what your body, your gut, and your Buddha nature have been whispering for years. Not every smile is safe, and not every lesson has to come the hard way. You now have the eyes to see and the heart to stay soft while doing it. If this video helped you notice something or someone you needed to see more clearly, leave a comment below. Your story might just shine a light for someone else still stumbling through the fog. And if you believe more elders deserve this kind of wisdom, help us grow by liking this video, sharing it with your community, and subscribing to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly. Let's hit 1,000 subscribers and keep walking this path of humor, clarity, and spiritual sass. Together until next time, trust yourself and don't drink the soup.